The man came down from the high country with winter still stitched into his coat. He rode a dun mare whose ribs showed through her hide, hooves chipped from months of stone trail and frostbitten silence. His hat brim cast long shadows across his face, and the townsfolk who watched him pass through their square said there was something in his eyes that looked like the edge of a broken bottle, cold, jagged, and likely to cut if you looked too long. He had no name they could settle on, just mutterings. The mountain man, the revenant, the one with the scar like a river down his jaw. He didn't stop in the first town, nor the second. He was riding towards something, or maybe away. Hard to tell with men like that. By the time he reached the flatlands, dust had replaced snow on his boots, and the air had taken on the slow, choking heat of late summer. He didn't speak unless he had to, and even then, his voice came low and dry, like dead leaves underfoot. Folks who tried to make small talk with him left with a strange unease, as though they'd heard thunder from a cloudless sky. Then he rode into Meridian. It was a rail town with more saloons than churches, crouched at the edge of the prairie like it was bracing to be swallowed whole. The men were either railroaders or gamblers, the women tired behind the eyes or mean in the mouth. He stabled the mare and paid for a week in the loft above a bakery that smelled like scorched wheat and desperation. No one asked where he came from. No one cared. That night, as the sun bled into the dust, she walked into the saloon. She was not from Meridian. That much was certain the moment she crossed the threshold. Her eyes sparked beneath dark brows like coals under wind, restless and unflinching. She wore a red scarf knotted at her throat, the color of fresh wounds, and her boots hit the floorboards with purpose. She moved like someone used to being watched but not owned, a girl who had run through fire and come out with flame in her belly. He saw her before she saw him. He was in the corner, nursing bad whiskey and worse thoughts, and for a moment he thought maybe he'd conjured her. But she was real, all right. She ordered rye and drank it like medicine. When one of the railroad boys made a comment, something about her mouth, something ugly, she turned his wrist sideways on the bar until he cried out. Her hands were small, but the bones in them were sure. Later that night, she sat on the back porch with a cigarette between her lips, staring out over the tracks like they might answer something she didn't know how to ask. He was there too, smoking in silence. "You always watch people like that?" she asked. "I watch fire when I see it," he said. She exhaled smoke through her nose, half laugh, half sigh. "Then be careful, it watches back." He didn't ask her name, she didn't offer it. But something passed between them in that heat-soaked dark, a recognition, maybe, or a warning. Over the next few days, they circled each other like wolves with old wounds. He saw the way she flinched at sudden noise, the way her eyes scanned every room before she entered. She noticed the way he never turned his back to a door, the stiffness in his shoulder when he lifted his coffee cup. Neither asked questions. Some kinds of pain are better left buried until they bloom. Trouble came on the 5th day. A man rode in from the south, lean and sunburned, eyes too light for his face. He walked into the saloon like it was owed to him and pointed a pistol at the barkeep's head. He wasn't there for money, he was looking for her. "Fire eyes," he called her, like it was a curse. "You thought I wouldn't find you." She stood slowly, hands empty, voice flat. "You're late." "What you think was gonna happen? You run off, torch a man's camp, steal his horse." "You deserved worse," she said. "Still do." That's when the hard-hearted man stood up. He didn't say a word, just reached back, slow as molasses, and drew the old revolver from the holster at his hip. The room froze like a held breath. The man with the pale eyes laughed. "You think I'm scared of a ghost?" "You should be," she said. He didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Just stood between her and the man like a storm cloud with bones. And when the fight came, it was fast and brutal and over in less than a minute. When the pale-eyed man hit the ground, bleeding from the mouth and throat, no one moved. She looked at him, not with fear, not with gratitude, but with something closer to recognition. "I didn't need saving," she said. "Didn't do it for you." "Then why?" He holstered the gun, eyes still on her. "Maybe I just don't like men who raise their voices at women." She stared at him for a long time, the corners of her mouth twitching like they couldn't decide whether to smile or snarl. "Fire watches back, remember," she said. He nodded. "So does stone." And in that ruined saloon, under the flickering gas lamps and stink of blood and sweat, something began, not soft or sweet, but sure. They didn't speak again that night. But when he left the saloon, she followed. They left Meridian before dawn, riding east into a sky the color of raw bruise. She'd come on foot, but somehow had a horse waiting, a flea-bitten gray with a bad eye and a quicker gait than it looked like it should have had. He didn't ask where she got it. She didn't ask where they were going. They just rode, dust curling off their heels, and the horizon stretching out like a secret neither was ready to tell. They didn't talk much the first day. She hummed sometimes, low and tuneless, mostly when the wind rose, or the prairie went quiet enough to make the birds seem like they were eavesdropping. He watched her out the corner of his eye, noting how she rode loose in the saddle, like a girl who'd lived more miles than years. By nightfall, they camped near a dry creek bed, ringed by cottonwoods whose roots clawed the cracked earth like hands too long in the grave. He built the fire. She lit it with a match struck against her boot heel. The flame caught quick, throwing long shadows across their faces, and for the first time since Meridian, she looked straight at him. "You ever had someone try to burn you alive?" she asked. He paused, then shook his head. She nodded like that made sense. "I have," she said, "twice." He didn't say anything, just handed her the tin of beans and poured coffee into a blackened mug. "You think I'm dangerous?" she asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because dangerous people don't bleed when they sleep." She stiffened, looked at him sideways. "You watch me sleep." He shrugged. "Once, in Meridian, you cried out, clenched your fists. Took a long time to settle." "You got no right," she said, voice tight. "Didn't ask for one." The fire cracked between them. After a while, she asked, "What about you? What's the worst thing someone ever did to you?" He poked the fire, stirring up the coals. "Made me believe they stay." She looked away then, eyes tracking the sparks into the dark. They slept on opposite sides of the fire. In the morning, neither mentioned what was said. But their silence sat easier somehow, like a saddle finally broken in. Days passed. The land turned rougher, the scrub rising into low hills and gullies where the wind howled like a lonesome dog. They crossed paths with ranchers, drifters, a traveling preacher who offered them salvation for the price of a prayer. She laughed in his face. He tipped his hat and moved on. One evening, they came across a burned-out homestead, charred fence posts, the black bones of a house, a swing still hanging from a scorched cottonwood. She dismounted without a word, walked through the ruin like she was looking for ghosts. He followed, careful not to step too loud. She picked up a scorched doll from the ash and cradled it like it still had warmth in it. "This ain't my place," she said, voice distant, "but I seen one like it, once." He waited, folk tied to the land like it was blood, lived hard but good, till the drought came, then the rustlers. Then the lawmen who weren't really lawmen. What happened? They fought back. She set the doll down, gentle as if laying a child to rest, and they burned for it. They slept under the stars that night, no fire. The wind smelled like old smoke. The next morning her hands were red with blood. "Rattler," she said, holding up a fang sunk into her forearm, "came in while I was sleeping." He moved quick, cut a cross over the wound and sucked the venom out, then packed it with chewed tobacco and wrapped it in cloth. "You gonna live," he said. "Damn right I am," she muttered through gritted teeth. For the next 2 days she rode pale and quiet, sweating through her shirt. He led both horses, kept camp tight, cooked food she wouldn't eat, but she didn't whimper. Didn't ask for help, just stared out into the dark with those burning eyes and held her misery like it was a promise she meant to keep. He sat beside her one night, watching the moon rise. "You're not alone anymore," he said. She didn't look at him, but her hand inched closer to his on the blanket. Didn't touch, not quite, just close enough to feel the heat of him. "You don't know what I've done," she whispered. "I know what you haven't." That was the first night they slept without the fire between them. By the time she could ride strong again, they'd crossed into canyon country, red rock walls rising up like the bones of giants, the river a silver thread at the bottom of the gorge. She led them off the trail and down into a hollow hidden behind a wall of mesquite. "There's a place up ahead," she said, "safe for a spell, if you trust me." He didn't hesitate, just nodded. They reached it near dusk, a low cabin pressed into the rock, barely visible until you were upon it. Inside, it smelled like sage and old sorrow, blankets folded neat on the cot, a kettle still hanging from the hook above the hearth. "Yours," he asked, "used to be, now it's just a memory." That night he kissed her for the first time. It wasn't tender, it wasn't rough, it was necessary. In the morning, the sun broke over the canyon rim, and the two of them stood in the doorway, watching the light catch the world on fire. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The burning had already begun. The days in the canyon passed slow and strange, like time had slacked its reins. They hunted rabbit in the brush and gathered wild onions that grew in the cracks between stone. He repaired the roof with cedar boughs, patched a corner of the hearth that had crumbled from years of disuse. She sang sometimes when she thought he wasn't listening, old songs with no language, just sound shaped by loss and sunlight. They slept close now. Sometimes he woke to her fingers against his ribs, searching maybe or anchoring herself to the waking world. He never asked what her nightmares held. He could guess. Fire, probably, screams. The sound of horses galloping away instead of toward. Once, while boiling river water for tea, he said, "You ever think about settling?" She sat on the cabin stoop with a rifle across her knees, watching two hawks circle high overhead. "Settling, just another word for waiting to be run off," she said. He didn't argue. He knew better than to talk of peace when the ground under you still remembered blood, but he fixed a garden fence anyway, and she noticed. Left him a bunch of wildflowers on the table next morning, their stems bound with twine and silence. They stayed until the weather turned. Then the riders came, 3 of them, dust-slick, hard-eyed, riding like men who didn't need roads. She saw them first from the ridge above the canyon, watched them dismount, piss on the mesquite, light a cigarette with matches stolen from some hotel in some unlucky town. She didn't flinch, didn't hide, just waited till they knocked on the door. The hard-hearted man opened it. "You seen a girl," said the one with the gold tooth. Red scarf, fire in her stare. The man didn't answer. "She's got something that don't belong to her," another said. "We mean to take it back." The girl appeared behind him then, shotgun in hand. Her eyes were cold, but her voice was fire. "You want it," she said, "then dig for it." She stepped past him and pointed to the ground. "Buried your friend 2 months back," she said, "after he bled out on my boots." They looked at each other, then at him. He didn't blink. "You gonna back her, stranger?" "I'm already behind her," he said. That's where a man ought to be when the woman in front of him's got a gun. The standoff didn't last long. It never does when one side has already decided to die if it comes to it. The girl fired first. Took the horse out from under the gold-toothed one. The others scattered, one crawling for cover, the other screaming as he ran. He shot the runner. The third dropped his gun and raised his hands. "Please," he said. "I didn't even know what we were coming for." She stepped closer, boots crunching the gravel like judgment. "Then you should have asked." But she didn't pull the trigger, just turned and walked away, eyes shining like molten steel. The hard-hearted man tied the survivor's hands and left him at the canyon mouth with a jug of water and a promise. "If you come back," he said, "bring flowers, and not the kind that grow out of graves." That night the fire was higher than usual. She sat wrapped in a blanket that smelled of cedar and smoke, staring into the flames. "You didn't kill him," he said. "No," she said, "not this time." "Why not?" She didn't answer right away. Then soft as wind through grass, "Because I'm trying not to become what I hate." He moved beside her, laid his palm over her hand. "You're not." She looked at him, not past him, not around him, at him. And then she said the thing he'd never expected. "I used to have a sister." He waited. She had hair like mine, laughed all the time, even when there was nothing funny. She made up stories, about running off, finding a place where nobody got hurt. I told her that didn't exist. She told me she'd make it. What happened? The men who came through didn't care about stories, or sisters. She pulled her hand away, not out of anger but grief. I buried her myself. He didn't speak. Just moved closer, leaned his shoulder to hers. "You got anybody?" she asked. "I did." "Gone. Long time." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, like a dam holding back water too wide to name. In the days that followed, they left the cabin behind. Too many ghosts now. Too many memories stirred up from the dust. They headed north, toward colder ground, toward hills where the trees hadn't yet learned to bend. They stopped in towns with no names and slept in barns with strangers. She took work as a stable hand. He fixed fences, traded stories for bullets. One night, in a place where the snow fell in silence, she reached for him beneath the blanket and said, "If we keep moving, maybe nothing will catch us." He brushed her hair back, kissed her forehead. Or maybe it already has. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, they stayed warm. By the time spring crept into the hills, they'd taken on the rhythm of old trees, rooted only in each other, shaped by wind and time. He built traps for rabbits, and she mended the soles of their boots with rawhide and beeswax. They never said it outright, but something about their pace, the way they stopped looking behind them, hinted at the smallest notion of staying. They came upon an old mining town, long since hollowed out by greed. The place had a chapel still standing, crooked and moss-laced, and a general store run by a woman with silver braids and a voice that never rose above a whisper. She looked at them like she knew what they were, two burnt things searching for a place not to be seen. "You can stay a while," she said, "so long as you don't bring trouble." "Trouble usually finds us," the girl said. The woman just nodded. "It always does." They took a room above the store. It had no stove, and the window whistled when the wind turned, but it was theirs. For the first time in months, they unpacked. Her scarf went over a nail by the door. His revolver stayed in the drawer overnight. She found work tending the garden behind the chapel. Her hands, scarred and calloused, coaxed life from stubborn soil. He repaired a bridge washed out by spring thaw, splitting wood until his arms ached, then splitting more. They didn't speak of the past, but it lived in the quiet spaces, in the way she flinched when thunder rolled too close, in the way he counted the knives before bed. Then one morning, as frost still clung to the roof slates, she found the letter. No name, just the words, written in a sharp, angular hand. "You can run forever, but fire leaves ash, and ash leaves trails." She said nothing at first, just folded it, tucked it in her boot, and went about her day like it hadn't landed in her chest like a nail. But that night when he reached for her, she held herself too still. "You got quiet again," he said. She handed him the letter. His jaw went hard. He looked out the window, scanning shadows that weren't there. "How long?" he asked. "Maybe a week. Maybe less." "You think it's him?" "Don't know," she said. "Could be one of the others, could be someone we missed." "What do you want to do?" She looked at him then, all the fire and sorrow and survival wrapped into one unflinching stare. "I want to burn it all down, whatever's left of the past, whatever keeps following." "Then we do it together." She stood, walked to the drawer and pulled out his gun, checked the chambers, loaded it quiet. "You ready to start a war?" He stood too, slower, but just as steady. "No," he said, "I'm ready to end one." They left before dawn. The town watched without watching, the way places do when they've seen too much. The woman with silver braids handed them a sack of bread and dried meat, nothing said, just a nod. They rode hard toward the place she hadn't named but knew by instinct, the one where it all began. She didn't have to say it. He saw it in the way her back straightened in the saddle, the way her eyes stopped scanning and instead focused like a blade. It took 4 days, 4 nights of lean sleep, of wind howling through pines and wolves calling in the distance like old songs. She spoke little, he didn't push. They were past words now. On the 5th morning they reached it. The valley was smaller than she remembered. The creek had run dry. The remains of a barn still stood, tilting into itself like it was tired of holding up ghosts. She dismounted slow, walked the perimeter, stopped at a blackened stump. "This was where they hung my father," she said, quiet. He joined her. "You loved him." She paused. He wasn't good, but he didn't deserve that. He nodded. "You sure about this?" "No," she said, "but I'm done hiding." That night they lit a signal fire on the ridge above the valley, not to be seen, but to be found. He sat beside her, rifle across his knees. "When they come," he said, "you lied." She looked at him then, not with gratitude, not even with love, but with trust so whole it could stop a bullet. "I will." And below, in the dark pines, shadows moved. They came just after midnight. 6 riders, faces masked, guns slung low and loose like vipers. Their horses kicked up ash from the old trails, hooves muffled by the softness of pine needles. The moon hung pale and high, casting their shadows long and uncertain as they fanned out across the black bones of the homestead. She saw them first. From her perch above the valley floor, crouched in the notch between 2 stones, she tracked their movement like a flame follows kindling, silent, deliberate, inevitable. He was further west, eyes behind a scope he'd built from broken glass and instinct. The rifle in his hand had belonged to a friend once, someone who'd died for less than these men had coming. They waited until the lead rider dismounted. The girl rose like a spark catching breath. Her voice rang out, low but clear, cutting through the hush. "You found me." The riders turned, startled not by her presence, but by the fact that she was waiting, ready. "You left a trail," the leader called back, stepping into the open. Even without the mask, she'd have known him. The way he walked, the way his hand hovered too long near his belt buckle, like violence was something he wore instead of did. "Weren't hard to follow," he said. "You never were." He took another step. She didn't flinch. "You know why we're here." She nodded. "To finish what you started," she said. "But I'm not the same girl who ran screaming from that fire." "No," he said. "But you're still a thief." That made her laugh, bitter and bright. "I didn't steal what I buried. I earned it, every last bone and bullet." Behind them, one of the riders turned just slightly, a flicker of movement too quick for any man to notice. But he saw it, the hard-hearted man. He fired once. The rider fell. Then the hillside erupted. She moved like lightning, shotgun up, eyes wild and clear. 2 more riders dropped before they knew where to shoot. The fire she'd carried in her heart had broken open now, fury made flesh, and the echo of it rolled through the valley like thunder. The leader ducked behind a wagon wheel, shouting orders to ghosts. "Fan out. Get her alive." He didn't notice the figure moving through the trees behind him, not until the barrel of a revolver pressed against his spine. "Let go of the past," the hard-hearted man said. The leader spun, fast, but not fast enough. The shot took him in the chest, close enough to throw sparks from the buttons on his coat. When it ended, there were only 2 riders left, one limping off into the woods, one lying still with eyes open to the stars. She stood over the body of the man who'd haunted her steps, the smoke from her shotgun curling like steam off river water. Her hands trembled just a little. He stepped beside her. "It's over," he said. "No," she whispered. "It started." They buried the dead at sunrise. No prayers, just stone markers and dirt, and the wind carrying the weight of all that hadn't been said. Later, sitting beside the creek that had once run red, she turned to him. "You ever think we're cursed?" she asked. "I think we're living," he said. She watched a hawk rise on the morning thermals, wings catching the light like blades of fire. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "Then don't. And you." He reached for her hand, not as a question, but as a vow. "Where you stay, I stay." She leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in years, the silence inside her didn't echo. That night they lit a fire not for warning, but for warmth. They stayed up late, not guarding, not waiting, just being. And when the last embers died, she whispered into his chest, "I think I'm ready to belong to something." He kissed her hair. "You already do." They slept, wrapped in each other's breath, while the stars bore witness to 2 souls who had burned away all that could hurt them. And all that remained was ash, and from it something new. Summer softened the valley. Grass came in green and stubborn where only ash had lived. Wildflowers dotted the edges of the creek, coaxed up by rain and the quiet insistence of time. The cabin they rebuilt stood clean-boned and square beneath the pines, with a red scarf nailed above the door like a banner of what had been survived. She planted a row of beans that grew crooked but true. He carved a rocking chair from oak, set it beneath the porch overhang where he could watch the wind comb through her hair. There was no ceremony to what they built, just days strung like beads, each one a little brighter, a little stronger than the last. Some nights they spoke of the past, not to dwell, but to understand. She told him about the girl she'd been, all fight and fire, how she'd taught herself to sleep with one eye open, and how long it took to unlearn that. He told her about the mountains, about the silence up there that didn't heal so much as harden. One evening, she brought out a small wooden box. Inside were pieces of the life she'd once fled. A button from her sister's dress, a scrap of charred paper, a bent silver ring. "I used to think keeping these meant I'd never be free," she said, "but now I think forgetting would be worse." He took the ring, turned it over in his fingers. "Sometimes memory's the fire that keeps us warm," he said. She smiled, not wide but whole. "Then I'll keep it close." In the village down the mountain, people began to hear of them. The fire-eyed woman and the quiet man who came out of the woods with hands that healed instead of harmed. Some came seeking help, a child with a fever, a widow with a crumbling roof, a boy who'd run from his father's fists. They never turned anyone away. She taught the boy to ride. He showed the widow how to lay new shingles. The child lived. Word spread slow and steady, like roots. One morning, she stood at the edge of their land and looked out at the trail that used to mean escape. "I don't think I'm running anymore," she said. He stepped beside her, rested his hand on the small of her back. "You're not." They still had scars, still woke some nights with fists clenched, breath caught. But healing wasn't a straight path, and they'd both walked far enough to know peace wasn't the absence of pain. It was the promise of return, of staying when staying got hard. Autumn came, they harvested more than they planted. Deer moved through the brush, unafraid. A sparrow nested in the rafters of the porch. One night, beneath a sky sharp with stars, she reached for his hand. "I used to burn to survive," she said. "Now I burn to stay alive." He pulled her close. "You burned down my sorrow," he said. "And you held the match," she answered. They didn't speak again. Just watched the fire crackle low, warm between them, not for destruction now, but for light. And when morning came, it found them there, two souls no longer hiding, no longer hunted, forged not by the wounds they bore, but by the love they chose, again and again, beneath the wide, forgiving sky.